The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata, which is our very own mind. Today is the first day of this 7-day sesshin in September 2022. And it's another one of the pairs of sesshin, because in less than a week after this one ends, well, basically a week after this one ends, we will begin the October sesshin. We like to do this because it is very, very powerful. When we don't have enough chance to come all the way back down again into our usual habit patterns, hopefully we don't ever do that. But still, it does happen. Inertia begins to take the place of attention and awareness. Then it's harder to keep going at the same level or keep going deeper as rapidly as we can do if we have pairs of sesshin or even triple sesshin. That's a little bit difficult to do here in the United States with Thanksgiving. But at Sogenji, we always had, when I was training there, although I think it may be different now, we had a November sesshin, which is very close to the end of November, and that led into Rohatsu sesshin with just a few days, 3 or 4 days in between. And after the Rohatsu sesshin, there was only another maybe 4 or 5 days between then. In fact, I think it was less than that, between then and what was known as the second December Ozashin. And before undergoing this regimen, it was a bit daunting, but once it was done, it was so amazing, because you don't have a chance to come all the way down from one sesshin before you're already in the next. And with the next, you haven't started at ground one like you would have started if you had been 6 months or a year or so from your previous sesshin. You only have dropped a slight bit. And then to reinforce that and take it even deeper actually is easy. And then the third sesshin, to do it even more so, is simply phenomenal. But like I said, in the United States, we can't really do it then, because Thanksgiving is near the end of November. And so we try to do it with earlier sesshin, and then with the January-February duo, and then with the March-April duo. And after that, the sesshins are single until we get to the fall again. It's really, really important to keep training. Mitra-roshi used to say, your life depends upon it. And at the time I would hear this, I would think, oh yes, of course, right, sure. But I realize the more I practice, that it was absolutely true. How we live our life, what enriches our life, how we're able to move over and with adversity. All these things are enhanced by deepening practice. This is very important. But in the beginning, when people first start coming to Zen practice, there is this inherent sense, and I had it as well, that you sit down on we called it this magic cushion, for a short while, and suddenly you're transported into a very different place, and suddenly you're free, and suddenly it's joyful, it's even possibly blissful, and yet that's totally inaccurate. The promise is there, and the promise is real, but it takes Depending on how caught we are, it takes a great deal of work to reach that point. Yet, if we're willing to do the work, it can happen. In pondering this morning, I wrote a piece that I think may possibly be included in a book that we're writing, and I say we are writing because a group of my students have volunteered and seamlessly gathered to help make this happen. One person is transcribing teishos. Another person is ready to, with his skills and experience, transform the edited teishos into physically a well-designed book. Others are helping with editing or with writing things like the introduction and so on. It's amazing how this project is coming together. And we hope that by early next year, there will be actually a book that people can purchase if they want to, either in print or as an ebook. But let me share this first. Zen is hyped up considerably in modern cultures, beginning with the Beat generation of the 1960s. It was it Jack Kerouac and Gary Snyder and various other people. They were mainly writers and poets. Excuse me, I just put eye drops in, and so I'm not seeing very well. Not that I can see very well anyway. But writers like Jack Kerouac and others wrote about, among other things, spiritual questing, including as Buddhists. Kerouac was raised French-Canadian Roman Catholic and for a while dabbled in Buddhism until encounters with significant Buddhists such as D.T. Suzuki took the wind out of his sails, because they had a very mistaken idea of what Zen practice was. They thought it meant to do whatever you wanted to do, whenever you wanted to do it. And that's not really so. Zen practice ultimately will bring us to a point where whatever we are called to do, whatever experiences we find ourselves in, we are able to easily, healthily, appropriately move through them without having a problem, without being, the expression goes, wrapped around a tree, without being derailed in our life. And that brings me to Jacques Lusseron's story. Jacques Lusseron was a French man who, when he was about 8 years old, was blinded in a school accident. His vision was never really super, and so he was wearing glasses. And back then, this would have been in the 1930s, or slightly earlier. No, it was the 1930s. Anyway, kids were rushing out to recess, and somebody shoved him from behind, not on purpose, just in the haste to get out of the room and get to playing. And it sent him careening into the corner of his teacher's desk, and so his eyelashes smashed into his eye, and he lost his vision. He completely lost one eye and lost vision in the other. But he had, perhaps because he was not seeing very well early on anyway, he had kind of developed an expansive awareness. And this is something we're called upon to do, whether we are blind or not, in our life. An expansive awareness beyond where we are told things are, where beyond where we think things are, beyond where we're accustomed to assuming things are, whether it's an activity, whether it's a thought, whether it's an assumption, whether it's a project, it doesn't matter. We tend to gradually become more and more constrained in our view of the world. This is why there's a wonderful Tibetan Buddhist book of teachings by Longchenpa, a 10th century Tibetan Buddhist master, called You Are the Eyes of the World. And it is absolutely right on, that title, because our perceptions, our assumptions, our conditioning determine how we see things, what our worldview is, what our world is. And I went into this to some degree in at least one of the teishos that is being included in this book project. But so I won't talk about it right now. But Jacques Lucéran, when he was in high school, the French were invaded by the Nazis. And he and his high school friends had a favorite uncle of one of their friends who they would go and visit because he was so interesting and had so many wonderful ideas, and we were so great to talk to, and clearly enjoyed being in the company of these teenage boys. And one day they went to his apartment, and they were told by the concierge at the door of the apartment building that the Gestapo had come and taken him away. And they began to see other people disappearing, people they revered, people they had great respect for. And so they decided, in addition to the fact that the French were becoming more and more frightened as a result of the Nazi propaganda, they decided they needed to do something about it. Risking their lives and the lives of their families, they listened to clandestine radio and printed up, probably typed up, a little newsletter, a little newspaper that eventually grew to become, as I understand it, Le Monde, the modern newspaper in France. And they would peddle it all over the country, handing it out to people who were sympathetic, and it would be distributed. And this distribution gave accurate news to counteract the Nazi propaganda, in hopes that it would help sort of make the French people realize that they were being duped. At a certain point, this little group of high school kids grew. And Jacques, because he was both blind and because of that possibly, is extremely perceptive of energy. He was the go-to person, the gatekeeper for who would join the group. And at one point, there was a young man who came and claimed to have the backing of somebody that Jacques highly respected, who was also a member of the group. And although Jacques' inner sense said, no, don't let this guy in, because he came with that recommendation from somebody that was trusted, he went ahead and let the guy in. And not long after that, that man betrayed the group. And it was set up wisely in such a way that there were cells, and each cell contained no more than 20-some participants, so that even though the group eventually grew to 500 kids, if any part of the group was betrayed, only about 20-some people would be revealed. And that was the case. And of course, Jacques was one of the people that was turned in to the French, run by the Gestapo, and imprisoned in a French prison for some months. and then exiled to Buchenwald, one of the death camps in Nazi Europe. And there his good karma allowed him to survive, because one of the intake prisoners whispered to him to claim that he was a translator, because otherwise, because he was blind, he would have been instantly executed. So he survived, but he was housed in one of the, they called them blocks, that was called the invalid block, where anybody who was between the ages of, I think they took kids as young as 12 and up to into their 70s. Anyone who was either old or missing a body part, or deaf, or blind, or mentally ill, or gay, or had sexually transmitted diseases. And I think that was their list of categories, that people that were housed in the invalid block, which was a barracks that would have been crowded with 400 people, and there were 1,000 people in that barracks. Jacques wrote that you could not move without encountering another human being, without bumping into somebody. They were that close. There was that crowded. And after 5 months in that condition, where death was, or the threat of death was everywhere, people were sometimes taken out into the square and shot in celebration, with the band playing merry tunes, or they were gassed in what were ostensibly showers, but really, instead of water coming out, gas came out. And they were sometimes simply murdered by guards, just arbitrarily, a knife in the back in the middle of the night or something, or they were even throttled by their fellow prisoners, who were freaking out and going insane because of the stress. And after 5 months, his body just couldn't handle it. He just couldn't handle it. And he became deathly ill. There were 3 doctors in the camp who were also prisoners, and they each diagnosed him, so he knows what those diagnoses were. But beyond that, I mean, diagnosis wasn't an issue. He could feel what was going on in his body, and this is critical. He could feel his face all swollen up with a very dangerous condition called erysipelas. He could feel the writhing of his intestinal tract, like as if it were filled with razor blades. He could feel the unsteady beating of his heart, wildly out of sync. He could feel his kidneys shutting down. He was dying. Pretty much all his organs were failing because of the stress and the fact that he was being ritually starved like all the other prisoners. And so they carried him away to what they euphemistically called the hospital, which was simply a piece of concrete out on the ground. By then it was spring, and laid him down so at least he'd have some space and could die with at least the peace of having some space around him. But what happened, because of the profound presence that he was able to bring to that experience, and this is critical, he came to a very deep awakening experience, one that was still alive and functioning is vital. An awakening that doesn't move into functioning is a useless awakening. But in his case, the awakening was deep, And the motivation was to continue working with it. So that decades later, when he was teaching in a university in the United States, his students were so impressed by his demeanor that they asked him about his history. And this is how come we know about this whole experience. So he did write that you cannot describe Buchenwald. It is beyond description. Presence. This is a vital aspect of our Zen practice. And let me continue here. So the whole tenor of the writing of the authors who were part of the Beat generation was to push the limits of the American culture at the time. Letting it all hang out seems to describe an aspect of at least some of those writings. It appears that due to expletive-filled writings of Jack Kerouac, the boundaries of what was acceptable in American literature were challenged and expanded. That was the first information on Buddhism that 20th century mainstream Americans had, although Buddhism had been introduced into America in I think it was 1896, Parliament of Religion in Chicago, when Shaku Soen, who actually had trained at Sogenji, came and gave a talk on Buddhism. That was the first people really knew about it. D.T. Suzuki translated for him. And after that, here and there was a very small handful of very wealthy Americans who were somehow managed to get contact with Buddhist monks and Buddhist priests. Very, very small. And so there was some Zen practice being done in America before the Beat generation, but it wasn't really well known. And the Beats publicized it, basically, brought it to awareness of people. So that was the first information on Buddhism that 20th century mainstream Americans had, and it resulted in an odd image of that spirituality. There is a real freedom in Zen, but it doesn't consist of doing whatever you feel like, whenever you feel like it. What does it consist of? It consists of being so profoundly present that obstacles that would stand in our way, and by what I mean by obstacles is ideas about ourselves and about the situation that would ordinarily stand in the way and limit our options, our responses, and cause potentially a great deal of pain and suffering to us. They simply aren't there because our awareness is so expansive, and we have let go enough of our self-image, our ideas about ourselves. We've let go enough of our conditioning. We've let go enough of our thoughts and sense of who we are and what we're told, that we can sink into a presence so profound that we naturally respond seamlessly, clearly, appropriately to the circumstances. And that's what Jacques did. He did recover, as we know, and after that, people led him to other prisoners who were freaking out because he had such a profound calm to him that he was able to help people calm down. They quit stealing his bread. He had a presence, a deep presence. And he said he found joy. And moreover, he said it never left him. And that is probably what those students of his in the university connected with. To be able to find joy in the midst of hell. this really is something that we can do as a result of our Zen practice. However, it is not something that is going to happen immediately. We can't sit down on a cushion or a chair or however we are doing our zazen and immediately plunge into that mind state. Moreover, many people, not everybody, but many people who come to Zen practice come out of a life or of experiences of trauma. And when we experience trauma, our natural inclination and self-preservation, by the way, is to shut down our senses, to become, as I was accused of in high school, a zombie. Walking, talking, responding, but nobody there. And nobody there on purpose, because to be there would be so painful and so frightening that we couldn't bring ourselves to it. But even under those circumstances, which I can attest to personally, it is possible to come to a place where you can respond to even difficult circumstances, even painful circumstances, even frightening circumstances in a very different, free, and unhindered way. This is the promise of our Zen practice. And of course, if we haven't experienced trauma, then it could unfold much faster. But, and let me continue again. Another image of Zen prominent in popular culture is that you can leave your challenging life behind and pop into a place of bliss, ease, and peace. Unfortunately, while that can ultimately be true, though I wouldn't use the word bliss, bliss has a lot of funny connotations, including a sense of being not present, being so high on some kind of joy that you're just floating along, metaphorically, on a lotus blossom up in the air somewhere. Unfortunately, while that can ultimately be true, although I wouldn't use the word bliss, which has connotations of being drunk with happiness, it is possible to open to what is innate in us. And I say innate in us. Profound peace, ease, and an ability to seamlessly experience whatever comes along in life, regardless of how positive or negative it appears. So many new Zen students hear that part and don't realize that to reach that, it's a long process that involves little by little recognizing through insight where we are caught in rigid and conditioned ways of thinking and acting. There seems to be an inherent assumption that as a new Zen student, it's possible to sit on the cushion, assume the posture, and zap, we are in an unbelievably wonderful mind state. Don't we wish? Yet it is possible to reach that promised land with a lot of hard work, many ongoing years of that work, and yes, it is worth it. In a blog a long time ago titled Why Bernie Kept Going Back to Auschwitz-Birkenau, Bernie Glassman, the first Dharma successor of Mitra-roshi's Zen Center, Los Angeles, wrote, quote, "As writers and philosophers have already said, there's no language for Auschwitz. I can only add, there are no thoughts either. We're in a place of unknowing. Much of Zen practice includes many teaching techniques used by Zen masters aimed at bringing the Zen practitioners to the same place of unknowing, of letting go of what he or she knows. Letting go. That's not so easy if we're invested in an image, in a way things are, and so on, which most human beings are. And that is the ticket, letting go thoughts, letting go what we think we know based on our thoughts, behavior, and past and future thoughts and behaviors. In order to reach this place of innate peace and joy, there is no other option than to let go. But how? We cannot let go until we can see where we're caught, and that's not what we usually think Zen practice is about. That's where Zazen comes in. The Susok'kan, the extended out-breath practice, is especially effective in this endeavor. The process and our daily life is amplified when we can pay attention. Because what Susok'kan does is it requires attention. It trains us in both attention and letting go. It's an invaluable practice. Again, it is so common to pay attention at certain, maybe critical times, but this, quote, pay attention, close quote, means 24/7 presence. Real presence. Constant, ongoing presence. What that means is that loading the dishwasher, we focus on, we focus on the full body experience of putting a glass in the place it belongs in the dishwasher in order to come out really clean. We focus as we load each item into the dishwasher. Is it in a condition where the dishwasher will actually be able to transform it into the cleaned version of that item? And where are we? On automatic? Are we just putting stuff in because we've done it so many times before? When we close the dishwasher and hit the start button, are we fully present? Again, when the dishwasher has completed its full cleaning cycle, are we fully present when we are unloading it and putting the dishes and pots and silverware away? Or do we realize when we're cooking again and we look for a utensil that it's not where it's supposed to be because we absent-mindedly put it somewhere else? It sounds picky, but all the rules and regulations of monasteries everywhere are there not only to help things flow, but at least as importantly, to help us pay attention. For it is the most profound attention that is what will bring about the liberation we seek. And it begins with the most mundane things. It's so easy to go on automatic. We've done something once, twice. We're going to do it many, many more times again. And just our body kind of goes into gear. It's a little bit like riding a bicycle. You have to pay attention to learn how to ride a bicycle, but then after that bicycle has been learned, you can pedal around without thinking about it. I used to be quite amazed at Burma, where the rainy season is extreme, with rain essentially all day long for 5 or 6 months straight. It's quite an experience. You never get dry. Your clothes never get dry. Nothing gets dry. The cows have mold on them. The houses have mold on them. The buildings have mold on them. Everything is soaking, sopping wet. And people still ride their bicycles through the rain, holding up their umbrella while they were riding their bicycle. I used to ponder that. Never really ever owned a bicycle in my life until many, many decades later. I did learn how to ride as a kid through when my parents went to visit particular friends of theirs, and there was a bicycle, and they didn't have kids' bicycles back then. And the friends lived at the top of a hill, And so I would, along with their kids, we would all take turns. And of course, it was a men's bike. And so I had to put my leg through under the bar, across between the handlebars and the seat, and start downhill and go as far as I could without falling over. It's kind of amazing because it was in the street. But those were earlier days when there wasn't so much traffic in any street. But we get that way about everything. It's important to really, really pay attention. It can get boring, seemingly, but actually, if you really pay attention into the most subtle aspects of whatever you're doing, the sensations in your body, the quality of the air, the feel of your hands as you're touching whatever it is you're doing, and so on, it can be actually quite a rich experience. And that's how Jacques could find joy in that awakening, or through that awakening, through that profound presence. We too can do that. But in this day and age, with our tech toys, it's a lot harder because growing up with the television, for example, where the screen flashes a different vision every few seconds, or sometimes every second, our brains are trained to disengage if something isn't happening constantly. And so we have to slow down. We have to relearn how to be in the moment. We're fortunate up here at Mountain Gate in this high mountain, extremely small, very quiet, spread out community with a forest right at our doorstep. Things are at a slower pace here. I wrote on Facebook once, some time ago, that I just witnessed the Ojosarco rush hour, 3 cars and a truck. In LA, in Southern California in general, where each freeway is a minimum of 5 lanes wide each direction, you have a few more than that, whether it's rush hour or not. So I urge you to really start to train your mind. Unplug for periods of time each day so that you're not looking at the screen all the time. Go for a walk. Get up in the morning and feel how the weather feels by going outdoors and feeling it. There's so many ways people can return to being in the present and find the joy that is there in the present as well. And that is a big start. But don't go under the misunderstanding that Zen practice will immediately take care of all your problems and launch yourself into some other plane of experience where things are really nice. Because unless you're extremely unusual, it won't. You may have a honeymoon period as you're beginning Zen practice. That's pretty common, where it's kind of exciting, new, different. And it's exciting, new, and different because you're present. And as soon as it starts going on automatic, that's a danger sign. But also, in order to find that innate joy, that innate freedom from being caught in anything, we have to see where we're caught. And that takes time, persistence, and a willingness to do so, to walk into the boredom, to walk into the discomfort that may come up, to walk into the anxiety, to walk into the fear, to walk into the memories, but don't get caught in them. If memories come up, tune into your body, feel how it feels, and then go back to the practice. Because Zen aims to bring us to living in the present moment, freely so, truly liberated. We can't do that unless we're really present. So thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.